Okay, let's just jump right into this. In today's explainer, we are definitely putting on our lab coats because we're taking a rigorous, purely scientific deep dive into one of the most intensely documented physical trace cases in recorded history. Honestly, Popular Mechanics even described this event as perhaps the most carefully documented sighting of all time. We aren't here to deal in rumors or hearsay. We are here to look at the tangible, physical evidence left behind in the dirt of a small French town.
Listen to this conclusion from Michel Bouniès, a scientist at the French National Institute of Agronomy Research. He was analyzing plant samples from our site, and his findings left him absolutely baffled. Before we get into the exact mechanics of how leaves can rapidly age beyond any natural earthly parameters, let's step back for a second and look at where this whole mystery actually began.
Okay, Part 1, the 1981 encounter.
So this story doesn't start at some classified military base or out in deep space. It starts in a quiet vineyard in the Var region of southern France. On January 8, 1981, at around 5 p.m., a 55-year-old farmer experienced something totally extraordinary. And you know what makes this case so scientifically viable? The incredibly fast response time. Literally by the very next day, local authorities, the gendarmerie, were already on the scene snapping photos and bagging samples. Then, just a few days later, the case was handed over to GPN, which is basically the French equivalent of NASA dedicated to studying unidentified aerospace phenomena. Boom! The scene was secured and analyzed almost immediately.
The man at the center of all this was Renato Nicolai, a highly respected, very grounded farmer known for his honesty. He absolutely wasn't out looking for aliens. In fact, his account is completely unembellished. He said he heard a whistling sound, looked up, and saw this metallic, lead-colored object, about 8 feet in diameter, descend and land right on his property. It sat there briefly, then took off to the northeast, leaving a circular impression behind. Nikolai actually assumed it was just an experimental military device, which is exactly why he called the police in the first place.
Moving right along to Section 2, Traces on the Ground.
Let's see how this goes from a simple farmer story to a bona fide physical crime scene. When we shift our focus from the sky to the dirt, it gets wild. The GPAN scientists arrived and found a circular impression roughly 2 meters in diameter, and here is the first massive anomaly. The ground inside the circle had been compressed by a mechanical pressure of about 4 to 5 tons. That is an immense, crushing amount of weight localized in one specific spot, way heavier than anything a conventional, mundane vehicle might produce out on that terraced land.
But wait, it wasn't just heavy, it was incredibly hot. Soil analysis revealed that the ground had been baked to temperatures between 300 and 600 degrees Celsius. You guys, that's upwards of 1100 degrees Fahrenheit. That proves a massive and sudden blast of thermal energy occurred exactly where Nikolai said the craft touched down.
But the physics are really only half the story here. The chemistry of the soil was completely out of whack. Investigators found trace amounts of phosphate and zinc. Even more bizarrely, they found unusually high concentrations of magnetite, which is a magnetic mineral. Now, this wasn't just a general regional feature. These specific, localized metallic compounds absolutely did not belong in that soil naturally. It was a highly specific, undeniable chemical fingerprint.
Which brings us to Section 3, the biological anomalies.
If you thought the soil data was weird, the biological data collected from the surrounding vegetation is where the science takes a sharp turn into the truly unknown. Looking at the wild alfalfa plants growing near the landing epicenter, scientists found that their chlorophyll pigment was weakened by a staggering 30 to 50%. And it was a clear pattern. The closer the plants were to the landing spot, the more severe the degradation.
But here is the real kicker of the whole Provence case. Like we heard earlier from Michel Bouniès, the young, freshly sprouted leaves anatomically looked their age, but biochemically, they had been entirely mutated. Their internal composition matched that of very old, dying leaves. Jean-Jacques Velasco, who was the primary investigator for the French Space Agency, later concluded that the only known way to replicate this specific, severe photosynthetic damage in a laboratory is through a powerful emission of electromagnetic fields, specifically right in the microwave frequency range.
All right, Section 4, Skeptics and Alternative Theories.
We absolutely have to look at the philosophical divide here.
Science demands that we test alternative theories and genuinely listen to the skeptics. Not everyone was convinced this was advanced anomalous technology, right? Some French skeptics pointed out that the physical traces on the ground weren't actually a perfect circle, but rather looked like crossing semicircles. An initial police report even threw out the idea that the marks resembled something made by the tire of a car, especially since the trace appeared on what was technically an active road.
And to their credit, the Japan scientists systematically went through and tested these mundane explanations. A meteorite, well, that would have left a crater, not a flattened cooked surface. Weather can't deposit localized magnetite. As for cars, Nikolai himself actually confirmed vehicles were passing nearby, but tire tracks don't emit microwaves that instantly age plant life. Finally, they seriously considered the nearby Conjuler's military base, which makes Nikolai's initial assumption of a military test highly plausible. But despite 2 full years of joint investigation by the space agency and the police, no conventional terrestrial explanation could account for all the data.
Let's zoom out a bit. Section 5. A broader UFO context.
To truly understand this anomaly, we have to look at how it fits into a broader, global context. When you start comparing Provence to other heavily documented cases, some really striking patterns emerge. Just look at the Rendlesham Forest incident in the UK just a year prior. You've got multiple witnesses, metallic objects, clear ground disturbances, and strange radiation. Or the Amarante case in France in 1982, which also featured the severe, unnatural drying of plant leaves that scientists concluded was likely caused by powerful electromagnetic fields. These are distinct, repeating physical footprints showing up across totally different cases.
What this explainer really highlights for us is the absolute necessity of the scientific method. Whether the object in Provence was some ultra-classified black project from a nearby military base or something entirely beyond our current understanding of physics, the approach remains exactly the same. We observe, we measure, and we analyze without prejudice. I want to leave you with this final thought. We so often think of the unknown as something abstract, or super distant. But back in 1981, the unknown left a 4-ton, 600-degree microwave-irradiated footprint right in a farmer's backyard. When the evidence on the ground directly challenges the very boundaries of our known sciences, what does that physical fingerprint actually teach us about our place in the universe? Keep questioning, keep analyzing, and I'll catch you guys in the next explainer.